I'm sure that you have been following the development of AI-generated videos. It's been truly extraordinary. A lot of them come up on my Instagram feed. Chris, you have built a company since 2018, and it really started as a research lab, from that came from the thesis from NYU. So can you take us to the back? Like how did you found the company? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So the origins of Runway date back to, as you were saying, almost a decade ago, so 10 years ago. We were doing research in like art school at the time, and trying to understand how neural networks can be used to create and synthesize and generate media. And so in 2018, we came across some interesting breakthroughs at the time that were interesting to kind of research more about and see if there's something around this idea of creating long-form content that could like be generated with AI. But you need to remember that 2018 in AI is like the 1800s, right?
Sure.
The resolution and the outputs of the models at the time were very tiny and small. Mm-hmm. And so it was a big bet to try to understand if we could scale those models to the point where you can not only generate consistent images, but consistent videos and consistent like 3D geometries and other things as well. And that's the bet we made 7 years ago when we started the company, which has been remarkably like the same today, which is like we're building these systems, these general intelligence systems that can hopefully generate and synthesize anything you can imagine. And that was the thesis we started back then in 2018.
So you launched the Gen 4 model recently.
Yes.
Can you talk about the technical capabilities? How is it different from the last generation?
Sure. So Gen 4 is our latest public model. It's a really consistent, really good model for cinematic video generation. So it's widely being used in Hollywood, in media, in filmmaking, in advertising, in games. It's a model that excels at like physics accurate like motion. So you can have things interacting in the world. You can have occlusion. You can have movements in ways that resemble hopefully what you want to see from a model at that scale. Gen 4 it's only been like live for 6 months. We released the first ever video model back in 2023, and that was Gen 1. And so we've been through, I would say, 4 iterations from models in 2 years or so, and now that timeline is shrinking. So hopefully we're going to get to a point where you can see major releases, hopefully every couple months.
If you haven't seen any of the videos generated by Runway, I highly recommend it. There are these short films that you can see on YouTube. They're incredible. I have to ask, there's a lot of criticism of the so-called AI slop, where there's the storyline doesn't really quite make sense, and they're quite random, and they come up. And what are your thoughts on that? Are people just using your technology to generate these content that don't seem to carry much value?
I'm an art nerd, and I like the history of art. And I think we've seen slop before. Photography was slop in the mid-1800s. Cinema, motion pictures in the 1900s was slop. The artistic class at the time really, really rejected photography and filmmaking. It was like an antithesis of everything they wanted to see in the world. And a small group of artists and engineers and thinkers at the time just understood this as a medium. They understood that eventually the camera, moving pictures, had to have its own language, right? And I think the mistake was to judge photography at the time by the lens of what a painter looks at the world, and the way the painter looks at the world. And I think that's kind of like what we're seeing right now, where a lot of what you can make with AI, we're judging it with the lens of like professional high-end filmmaking, And for me, it's like, that's probably the wrong lens to look through it. This is a new medium. It's a new way of creating. It's a new form of expression. There's of course things that are going to be not interesting, but there's a lot of things that are really interesting. And focusing on the bad or like the boring parts is like not that interesting for me. I much better prefer to think about what are the net new things that you can do with this. If you think about video, media, general world models as a new medium of creation, then like who are the artists and the people kind of finding the language of sorts that's common to that new thing. And that for me has been a consistent pattern in the kind of evolution of AI over the last 10 years, is that we always judge the new thing by the lens of the old thing, which I think is a mistake if you consider that the new thing is just totally new.
It's interesting that you use the painting versus photography comparison. I presume that photography probably didn't even have a name for many, many years. Do you feel like, would you predict that in 10 years we wouldn't even call it AI videos?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a great point, and it's true. Photography didn't have a name for a long time. When daguerreotypes were first invented around like mid 1800s, people used to speak about them as mirrors with memories, which is a great, beautiful kind of description of what a photograph is, right? It kind of is like a mirror with a memory. And that was what people were seeing at the time. But what happened was eventually enough people experimented with the medium, enough people played with it and understood that it was more than a mirror and it was more than a painting. And then we started building this language of photography, which gave eventually birth to motion pictures. We gave eventually birth to like a whole new art form, which is cinema. I think we're in the mirror with a memory phase of AI, right? We're looking at this and we're trying to make sense of it with the language and the world, like mental models that we have today that are not well suited for, I would say, what you can do with the models in the long term. And there's many more things that we'll start to see that we just never were able to do before, and we'll need to figure out the right words to describe it. And so for me, that's the most interesting part. I don't have the answer for that. I think probably those words and those mental models will emerge from the collective kind of like iteration of many just trying new things.
So I think investors are really embracing the video medium these days, and there are quite a few startups here in Europe as well. Black Forest Labs, for example, Veed, Synthesia. But when you got started, I imagine that you didn't have quite the same appetite from investors. So I presume there are many young founders in the room. So talk a little bit about that. What was that like pitching them the idea?
Oh, it was hard. It was impossible. I mean, if I showed you 10 years ago what image, there wasn't even like a video model altogether, right? Mm-hmm. And image models weren't really like a thing. There was like a couple, one or two like models that could do some really early, like really low res, really pixelated like generative outputs. And so when we pitched and we were trying to like do this, which is like, hey, this is a new art form, this is a new medium. I think this is going to change how we do film, how we do ads, how we do media, how we do pretty much video all across. People thought we were insane. Like, I remember, I think I pitched 100 times and 98 people thought it was just like, this is insane and it's never going to work. So many people told me just like do something else or work on slides, work on whatever else you could think, And I think there wasn't a consensus around it. And I think the thing I've realized over time is if there's no consensus around it, it's probably really worth going there.
Oh,
like
okay.
When there is consensus, it's too late. When there's a name for it, it's too late. When there's a mental, like, I think investors love doing market maps, certs. I think that's too late. Like market maps are where ideas go to die. It's like you've segmented like things as you think are going to work. But I think eventually like the role of innovation is to disrupt that in the first place, right?
Sure.
And it's going to look really unconventional and like strange and weird until it works, right? And so I think we've learned in research as we build Runway is try to search for those ideas that are still non-consensus, those ideas that feel like that's strange, that feels weird, because eventually if they work, they're going to become consensus, and you want to be always kind of pushing the boundary in that way.
So you obviously have competition from the larger, perhaps newer entrants, VO3 from Google, Sora by OpenAI. How do you plan to, how do you square that? Because, obviously they're backed with much bigger compute power than you do.
They do, but we still have better models than them.
Okay.
A couple things. I think, first of all, when you create a new market, and if the market is interesting enough, you're going to have competition, right? So I think it would be unreasonable to think that if you create this idea of video and media models that can create consistent kind of imageries, if it's interesting enough, you're going to have other people follow. And I think that's already happening, right? That's to your point. We're seeing large companies and large research labs now following the same path, right? And I think it's great. It means that there's enough interest and enough of a big opportunity here for others to also try to build. I do think that if you look right now pragmatically at what is being going on, like I would say the race of building these models is that there's like a function of data and compute and resources, but there's another one that I think people underestimate, which is taste, which is intuition, right? Building these models, it's not just like throwing money at a problem. I think there's enough companies out there who've been trying to throw a lot of money at it and still can get the performance and the quality that you need. And I think part of it is there's an advantage of being good at trying something for many times and seeing what actually works. And you build some sort of like natural understanding of where to optimize and what to optimize in the first place. And I think that's very hard to buy. It's just experience. Like experience is built and it's gained by building things over time.
Okay.
And one of the things I would say we've excelled is we've tried this for 7, almost 8 years. So we've tried many things. We kind of have a good sense of, I would say, a good understanding of our research direction. We started working on world models in 2021. We started building these video models when there wasn't a consensus around video models in the first place. And there's stuff that we're working on right now that doesn't feel yet consensus, that doesn't feel yet attainable. And I think those are the things that are going to define the kind of next evolution of AI. The things that are in the fringe, in the like side parts of the industry. And I think you need innovation, you need smaller companies, very lean companies that can do that. And I think we're in a very well position to do that.
I think a big worry for the large language model players is that the world doesn't have enough data, and then that we're relying too much on synthetic data. And I believe that you have licensing deals with Getty Images. Are you worried about that? Do you think the video medium is not going to run into that problem?
No, I think look, I think there's enough data out there that we haven't even like fully tapped. I also think there's human level data. So if you think about like, I don't know, reading stuff, books or articles, that's things we humans have written about, and it's written in the way that we see the world. All of our biases are there. Like language as a medium has an encoded view of the world that actually is not the representative world. It's not reality, right? There's data that you can use to train models that's much more closer to actual reality, like unobserved, like untouched, like by humans. And you can think about like scientific observational data. You can think about just like recordings that are not necessarily like parsed in the way that we might use or train models before, but it's just sitting there, right? And so there's enough data, I would say, to train these models in multimodal ways that we still haven't yet touched. We mostly rely on web data. I think web data is like the old paradigm. There's enough new data that will come not from the web, but from the real world, from sensing, from measuring, from gathering images, from like collecting enough of video outputs. And that's, I think, just the beginning of it.
Okay. Well, there's no question that Hollywood is really embracing AI, and your technology is being used by the giants from Netflix to Disney. But at the same time, it's been widely reported that there is a destruction. The creative industry in LA has been really decimated post-COVID. Studios are pulling back and they're creating less content, and many animators and such have lost their livelihoods, and people sort of blame,
right,
the likes of your company for that. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
I do and I don't. I think one thing that some people in the creative world have forgotten is I think the history of art is the history of technology. Those two things are intertwined, right? Hollywood was built as an industry on the backbones of major scientific technological breakthroughs, right? The camera at the time was a technological breakthrough. So technology allowed Hollywood in the first place to exist. Animators have built their careers on top of like great technology, right? And this is great technology. It's great technology for many different applications, including arts and media. And one of the things that I would say, I've seen Hollywood, and we're working with, I would say almost every studio right now, is that studios are finally understanding that these are very powerful tools. And if you know how to wield them and use them, they can take you very far. And of course, it's going to be, so the part that I agree is, of course, there's going to be job changes, yes. But to the point that Benedict was speaking about before, there's a lot of things that change as technology changes, right? We used to have people pressing buttons, so people like moving you in the elevators up and down. There was the equivalent of that in media, which is like people used to play music in theaters. You went to a movie and there was a live orchestra to play the music because movies didn't have sound, right? And when sound came to movies, people revolted. Like there was a strike, there was a huge like backlash because people wanted to prevent talkies from being a thing, right? And now we're like, of course that's not the right move, right? Of course you want you want sound in movies. Of course, there's more jobs to be made. We have Hans Zimmer because movies are made with sound now. There's a lot of new jobs that were created with it. Right now, in AI and like job discussions, I think we're in that same kind of like momentum where we're looking at the new thing with the lens of the old thing. And I think that's a mistake. Like, I'm pretty convinced that you're going to create way more jobs and you're going to have a way more like flourishing media Hollywood industry by embracing AI than by trying to prevent it from actually happening.
Do you feel like we're going to reach a stage where any concept that you can dream of, you can just prototype it with AI? You can bring the idea onto the screen. Like Lovable is very much doing that. They're prototyping ideas for enterprises. You know, do you think we're going to reach a stage in the future where creators don't even need to, they can just think of something, they can prompt it on your platform and something will come up. And that leads to my second question. If you're someone who's pursuing a job in the creative industry, do you think that person should go to film school still, or should they just,
Yeah, so I guess to answer your first question, I think yes, we're getting to a point where you can create hopefully anything you have in your head, you want to imagine. But here's the thing, when we think about creating, right, we always think about creating in a one-to-many kind of way. We think of, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a creative, I'm an artist, I'm going to create something and millions of people are going to watch it, right? So I need to become, my profession needs to become like the thing I'm making, right? I think that's one part of how you make things these days, but there's a growing trend with AI video, AI image, AI media models where people are making things not for many to consume, but for an audience of one, which is yourself.
Okay.
Right? So think about it this way. If you take a representative sample from everyone in the audience here, I'm assuming a lot of people here go to the gym, like exercise, right? I'm assuming 99% of the people here that go to the gym don't go to the gym to become a professional athlete and like compete in the Olympics and be like the top 1% of whatever sports or exercise they do. They do it because they feel good, right? It's an exercise. You're exercising your muscles.
Okay.
A powerful thing about this idea that you can generate really quick, really kind of fast, and really cheaply content is that you can start exercising your creative muscles. There's a muscle you have in your brain. Creativity is a state of mind. It's a way of looking at the world. And many people have not exercised that muscle in a long time because it's really hard. Like, you have to like be trained as an artist. You have to like devote your life to it. There's so many people making thousands of videos on a weekly basis in Runway just for themselves. They go, they make something, they watch it, they laugh, it's fun, you see an idea, you visualize it, maybe you share it with your family, that's it. There's value there. Like, that in itself becomes a creative exercise. It's going to the gym for your creative mind. You're exercising a part of your brain you've never exercised before. That's beautiful. I think that's enough of an interesting application of things there in the creative world that doesn't have to be thought in a way of like, I'm going to become, I'm going to quit my profession, I'm going to become an artist, just so you exercise your brain. And so that in itself, I think it's a growing industry and a growing market that perhaps has been unexplored. And then the second thing, well, if you're actually devoting yourself to this, if you want to like actually be trained as a filmmaker or be a creative, I think filmmaking is not about hardware. It's not about the camera, right? Like, I can give you the same hardware that Christopher Nolan uses to make like all his movies. I can give you the IMAX camera that he uses. And I'm sure you're a great creative and artist, but I'm pretty confident that we both won't be able to like make what Christopher Nolan makes with the same camera, right? Why not? Because there's vision, there's an artistic idea, there's an articulation of the world that you want to see out there, and you use the camera as a medium, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're actually thinking about growing and studying or becoming an artist, think about the vision, don't think about the tools, right? Think about where you want to do, how you see the world, and then figure out which medium helps you get there. So yeah, of course, like, think about the technology itself, but more importantly, think about what you actually want to tell the world. That's probably going to be much more important than the technology itself.
Okay, that's fair. As someone who has worked in broadcast news before, I truly have an appreciation for how difficult it is to film. Cameramen would often whine that to get 30 seconds of really good B-roll, you need to film for half an hour.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know, I can't see the future, but maybe 20 years down the line, some of the video can be generated actually by AI. But there is so much deepfake, concerns about deepfake, and do you think the responsibility falls on you as a technology founder and CEO to police how people use it?
I think it's important to understand, first of all, AI as a general purpose technology, right? It's a technology that allows you to do many things. You can make anything from, like, of course, videos and games to audio and websites and code and copyright. There's many other things. It's a general purpose system that allows you to do many things, right? As a general purpose thing, there's of course misuses, right? All I would say general purpose technologies, the internet is a general purpose technology, the camera might be a general purpose technology, have really good, interesting, potential and beneficial use cases for society. And of course, there's misuses of the technology itself. I think, one, focusing only on the misuses might miss the picture of like everything else you can do. Like, to go back to the analogy of the camera, of course there's beautiful things you can do with a camera. Of course you can also do really bad things with a camera, right? But the emphasis on how you like figure out ways of preventing those is that you teach society and you teach people how to use it responsibly. Companies can put their part. We do moderation. We work with a lot of the studios, and we have great ways of like protecting what they want to protect. But at the same time, I think most of the responsibility comes from the end users. If it's a general purpose technology, I can't really prevent all the infinite use cases of how you're going to use it. I need to teach you. And more importantly, I need to teach society how to think through it. Okay. And so part of what we do, we have a film festival that goes every year in both New York, LA, and Paris. This year, it gathered like 6,000 people from all over the world to submit films. We exhibit the films at the Lincoln Center in New York, which is this beautiful venue. And that is mostly as a way of helping people understand that you can create consistent, realistic videos and images. And so you need to update your priors, you need to update your views of the world. And the discussion like moves away from deepfakes as alone and moves much more into like the interesting, positive outcomes of it. And I think that's what we need more of.
That'd be interesting. I wonder, if a few years down the line, maybe you will have to add content moderation. Or
we do have moderation.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, of course there's moderation in place. But again, there's many other things that you can do with AI that I think people have to have responsibility in how they use it. And it's not the responsibility of one company, but I think my point is like our society as a whole needs to update how we think about it in the first place.
So right now, I think the bulk of your customers are in the creative industry, advertising, film, media. What other verticals do you think can benefit from what you do?
If there's a screen, there's probably like potential for Runway. We sell a lot to studios, to advertisers, to brands. But if you think about, for example, architects, most of their time is spent on rendering, which is somehow very similar to the time that like VFX or media companies are spent on making professional like movie making outputs. And so there's a growing set of the market for us that's winning on and helping architects and designers just like get their renders and outputs faster. We're doing a lot in games. In games, there's two kind of like main opportunities. One is real time. So linear media is the way we consume films and videos. Non-linear media is games, open worlds. There's enough of an opportunity to do more real time out there that game companies are really excited about. Okay. And then teaching, like schools, like universities can really benefit from using AI to learn about how the world works, and we're also spending a lot of time there.
Very interesting technology and very interesting company. We're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Thank you.